All right, here he is, Random Randy. Hello, my friend. Hello, hello. Thank you for being on Local Listens today. And as you know, we got a ritual first question for a first time guest. And it's funny, we had planned to have this chat in 2022, and a lot of time has passed, but I'm glad we've had time to sit back and reflect. And so I'm happy to have you here, man. And as a way of getting to learn more about you, I've been looking forward to asking you this, man. Randy, when did you start to speak your truth?
Ooh, well, it would have been, let's see, speaking it. So putting it into action, not just concept within me. Let's see. I'll go with, let's see, a year and a half ago. And there were quite a few catalysts, right? Um, would have been a year and a half ago. So it's strange. It's a lot of the same timing as many of us in this circle of friends, because we're definitely, there's more going on than a community here. There's more going on than just some podcast folks. Like these connections, and I was speaking with Nico of Upstate Unconventional earlier today. These connections are so valuable, dude. So I'm so thankful, first of all, for you having me on and for connecting with me here today. But yeah, a couple of years ago, I had a situation where something that I had thought I'd imagined, something that I had come across within a mental image, given to me upon a question to what I thought was just the universe, right? I mean, this was probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago that this happened. I shouted a question to the void, and the void answered back with a picture and in my mind's eye, and I carried that picture with me for a few years, and I never forgot it. I never forgot that sense of connection that I had with something greater than myself. This would have been on the tail end of self-destructing for an extended period of my life, right? So basically, I just stopped everything I was doing and said, if I could sit here and do nothing, then that is a lot more constructive than destroying myself, actively setting out to destroy myself. So I started meditating, developed a form of practice of my own, which is kind of like a salutation. I respect and admire the different elements that are in play in this world, in this thing that we're a part of. It's incredible, and fortunately, I have had experiences prior to that of the psychedelic nature, so I had a little bit of an insight as to there's something more. um I think that that's the incredible thing about psychedelics. Even if you're relatively young and you don't really know what you're getting into, you can recall those moments later in life and they bring meaning. But anyway, let's see. So a couple of years ago, I had this confirmed, this
Hmm.
idea, this thought, that this picture that was provided to me, I felt. And it had to do with kind of the nature of reality. And the question on a lot of people's minds is, what is this place? What is this thing? What are we taking part in? What does that look like? And essentially I was shown a bubble. It's pretty vague. It's, you know what I mean? It's pretty, I mean, you can look at the sphere of the earth as it supposedly is as a
Hmm.
bubble. You can look at atoms or molecules as bubbles, right? There's always those diagrams that look like bubbles stuck together, and I think that that's for good reason. But so that was confirmed while watching the Joe Rogan podcast, and
Nice.
he had Robert Bigelow on. And Robert Bigelow, for those that don't know, is a an aerospace engineer and like billionaire. He does everything with all of the different agencies, right? He's hand in
Hmm.
hand with those that are actively pursuing, I'll just say, like, intelligence, right? Like
Right.
they're pushing the envelope on so many senses, like hypersonic aircraft, undersea habitats. I mean, you name it. Like these people are engineers. They're building, they're learning, they're
That
doing
sounds
these
like an
things.
interesting episode for sure.
And so he was having a conversation with Joe, and he goes, well, pretty soon, Joe, the way that the way that things are understood is going to be turned upside down. It's going to completely change. Now, I thought that he was perhaps speaking of like electric universe theory, or
Mm.
the electric universe kind of understanding. I don't think it's even a theory anymore at this point. Like if you understand how energy works or begin to understand that, you kind of
The
realize,
electric
yes.
universe perception now. Yeah.
Right. It definitely is a true perception for me, and I think many others out there, which is kind of why the Tartaria topic is so fascinating, and I think why it's a front loaded phenomena,
Mm.
right? For this understanding to come forth, for this electric universe, harmonic resonance understanding to emerge, there had to be the concept of Tartaria and free
Interesting.
energy. That's how it was introduced to many people that wouldn't have cared about spirituality or wouldn't have cared about their own personal energetic system. Um, your average person like
Let
me.
me ask you this, Randy, because I love talking about Tartaria, but I'm also aware of like there's almost like not a stigma, but there's definitely a lot of people out there who are like, what is this mud flood thing? Like, what is it? Like, maybe we should start from the beginning. I'm sure people listening know about Tartaria,
Yeah, dude, I'd
listening
be
to my
happy to
podcast, but
elaborate.
maybe
Absolutely.
like in a brief way, like what is the because like Tartaria for me
Well, and
seems
and,
like
and Tartaria is
a
a
pipeline.
misnomer. It's
Right.
it's a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
misnomer, right?
But
First of all, which is why a lot of people feel like negatively about it. They're like, no, you got the either or problem. Uh, a lot of people are into the understanding that something has to be this or that, either this or that, right? It turns out, and this is based on personal experience, understanding of many different kind of facets of this reality. It turns out there is only and then. Okay. If you look at something, you feel something, you speak something, there is only ever an and then,
mm,
right?
the continual process.
It's the the forever now moment, right? There's only ever an and then. It's not or. It's not either or. That's the illusion. That's the illusion of this place, right? Is it
Duality
has
and
to be red or
polarity.
blue? Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes. So that's the nature of this place, and so people frame this topic, Tartaria, in an either or kind of category, when really it is a framework for the understanding of many different facets of a proposed reality that we don't really know whether or not this country existed. It's definitely on some maps and some of
Mhm.
these things that we have that once you come to understand the nature of what we're really taking part in, listen, man, it's all up for grabs. It's all and then there is no or. Like once
Yeah,
you
yeah.
decide, so it's crazy, but that's like later on in the
Well, yeah.
conversation.
In a basic understanding, though, like, people should probably know that Tartaria, in a general sense, is the idea, and the mud flood is the idea that there was this ancient civilization with very complex, antiquated buildings that had special tech that would almost generate electricity in a very special way. Like look at cathedrals, look at very
Correct.
strange old buildings, and they are connected to what's called Antiquitech. But the
Correct.
mud
Yep.
flood, I think, is what loses people.
Right.
Because
Yeah. Because it seems like an all encompassing thing, right?
right,
Like
right,
we have the idea of
like
mud
a
flood.
global mud flood.
We think water world, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
I'm not listen, I'm not saying water world wasn't a thing at some point in the past or some point in the future,
There was
right?
definitely
So
some kind of cataclysm, though. I'm definitely in
I
that.
think there have
That
been many. I think that there have
many, yeah,
been many, and essentially, we not only are we on the back of a turtle, but we are also standing on the backs of giants, literally and figuratively.
yeah, yeah,
It's and so this is where the idea of culture layer comes from in
yeah.
archaeology, right? They'll look at something and they'll say, "How come there's 6 feet of dirt on top of this building, like covering up the first floor windows?" This is the biggest thing that people get into Tartaria in with,
Yeah.
rather, is windows that are sitting halfway underground, full windows. You know what I mean? So it becomes kind of clear that they weren't built to be underground. If you've ever been in a basement, you know the humidity level, that when it rains outside, you get water coming in if it's not sealed properly, and this and that. So, most people see these ancient buildings, or we'll just say old world buildings, right? Old
Yeah.
world is a good term, and many of them have some 10, maybe 15 feet of earth built up around them. I
Yeah,
mean, they're
people could
even
just imagine that basement floor or that ground, that quote unquote ground level is like almost halfway underground. And,
right,
people say like,
right.
oh, well, they dig it out and they build the foundation. But the fact that the window is placed like that is very funny.
Well, and you don't have a lot of pictures, but what you have is
Yeah,
etchings. You have a
right,
lot of
right.
etchings showing these buildings like Town Square in, oh, somewhere in Switzerland or something. I can't remember. It's a really famous one in the Tartaria circles, but you have this town square complete with like the courthouse, this and that, really huge, immaculate buildings. And there's like a celebration taking place in the courtyard in front. And so there are etchings of these celebrations. And you see in these etchings that there's literally a floor and a half that is no longer above ground when you have a picture from modern day. And most commonly, it's in places like Russia. I think the northern latitudes somehow were a little bit more affected, and that kind of ties into Hyperborea and what the essence of black rock really is and all of this stuff. But we can get into that. So
That sounds fun. Yeah.
Tartaria opens so many doors once you put away the stigma
Yeah.
of something has to be
I have a quick
either
question
or.
about that too, because besides the architecture, which, if like I'll play devil's advocate, like let's say Tartaria is total bullshit, but the good news is that it's led a lot of people to pay attention to what buildings look like and how they're built. But the other thing, and I'm not saying I believe Tartaria is bullshit. I think it's a lot of fun to talk about and speculate on. But the other kind of like pipeline into this theory are there's the orphan trains, there's the world fairs,
Yep.
there's even like Civil War
Oh, dude,
conspiracies.
I'm
It's
all about the
so
Civil
cool.
War
Yeah, I
not
love it.
being yeah, it's all a show, right? If you've seen anything happen in this world in the last lifetime of yours, right? Have you not noticed that everything is fake, everything is bullshit, and everything is to pull some kind of wool over some kind of sheep? So you see this thing happening, right? Where those that aren't prepared or willing to look within themselves are given their answer. They are given their knowledge. They are handed a de facto solution to a manufactured problem, and they eat it up. They're stuck in this kind of cycle now, which is where a lot of people who call bullshit on Tartaria kind of fall into. No, that's not possible. Listen, we've got history books, that say otherwise, right? Meanwhile, there's also history books that state exactly that it was a place. So you got the argument, no matter which way you look, and that's with any topic. Absolutely any topic,
There's a funny
especially
analogy. It's like people are seeing UFOs, yet there's people out there that are like, no way, that's all bullshit. It's like, no,
right.
we're not saying it's 100% true. We're saying it's possible. And it's definitely like there's a lot of evidence to prove
Well,
that
right.
or that
That's the
it's
from
real.
listen from where
Yeah.
I'm sitting. What I
Yeah.
see is truth, right? And I think this is something that's lost on us for a lot of probably years, maybe as far as 5 to 6, maybe 1,000 years. 5 to 600, maybe 1,000 years. The idea that somebody else can be wrong has been hammered and hammered and hammered. Somebody else's perception, rather, not that somebody else. I mean, people can be right, people can be wrong. We live in
There's
duality,
always a
right?
third side to
But
that
there's
point. Yeah.
yes, and there's always. I mean, as many people as there are on this realm, planet, globe, freaking plate, whatever it is, right? Um, System is definitely a machine,
This
whatever it
turtle
is. But
shell.
yeah, whatever this machine is that we're all cogs in, it's it becomes clear after you open your heart, really, and open your mind, that everybody is encountering something so completely unique.
Yeah.
Even though we see media as being similar, and we see a uniformitarian understanding distributed, so we just automatically infer that that's the way it has to be, because that's all we've been taught, that's all we've been programmed to do. But something like Tartaria can teach you to break your own internal programming, because you can see the contrast. You can see the argument being valid on both sides. On the side that says Tartaria wasn't the end all be all to previous civilizations, then there's like a whole nother side that says that everything was Tartarian, right? Now, it's kind of tricky because it's clear that there was an old world and much of it has been since buried, and a lot of that's admitted. We see a lot of excavations happening when we're trying to go back into the past. So it's not a coincidence that things before us become buried, much like the truth of 10 years ago becomes buried or muddied, right? That's why the term is called muddied. When the idea or concept of something becomes unclear, it becomes muddied. And there's reasons for all of these synchronistic, happenings and meanings. It's really super incredible. And that kind of and it goes right in the face of everything we've been taught. And that's the hardest part for people to kind of grasp.
Well, let me ask you this, because you had brought up this cool phrase I've never heard before, but I guess from an anthropological perspective, it makes a lot of sense. You brought up the culture layer, and let me give you a scenario. Like, there could be people who grow up in different parts of this universe, and in camp A, there's people who are growing up believing that the Earth is just this dead place. It's like inert matter. There's no life to it. We're just rocks, and there's water, sure, but there's no life, no substance to it. And then there's Camp B, who lives in a different culture, and they believe that they are living with a living being. Like, this Earth is alive. There is an entity that they're living with, living on, living upon. And those people could grow up with such different views, and that's just the cultural layer. They're both living in the same world.
Well, yeah, that's a different sense of cultural layer. Yes, that is the figuratively literal sense. But what I was referring to is just the buildup of material.
Oh, right.
Right. That is touted as being the reason. For example, like someplace in England might have a 6 to 10 foot cultural layer, which is supposedly dung from animals that they've been traveling around with. People's garbage is a big one, and the dust or debris that comes down somehow from above and creates like a layer of soot or sediment. So but what you're saying is completely probable also. And that's the important thing that I definitely urge people to understand is there's only ever and then. And that's just a perfect example. We're so busy trying to say no, my way is it.
Man. Do you ever see those examples in the Amazon rainforest where it's like they could find lost cities that really weren't lost? It's just that they're the trees over millions or how many years just grow
on top.
Yeah, it's like you can't see them anymore, and they were once there, and then
well, now they show with LiDAR scans
exactly
that they're underneath all of America, all of North America.
Right.
And the Smithsonian had gone through and created this book called The Smithsonian Contributions to Knowledge. I urge people to go take a look at it. Within the first 2 pages, their mission statement is to acquire information and evidence, and extend that information and or evidence and distribute it thusly to the people, to us. That's the mission of the Smithsonian Institute. The way that it's worded, though, in a really subtle sense, is similar to kind of inferring that you're going to create listen, this is what happened, right? You got to tell him this is what happened. All right. And listen, you're going to be my expert, right? Kind of like on Pawn Stars, they got to bring in their own expert, right? So this is what they've been doing. It's clear that this is what they've been doing for an extended period of time. So their mission statement is right there. It's not laid out, as mischievously as I infer based on my experience looking into what the Smithsonian has gotten their hands on and what has disappeared in their hands and everything else. But they spun this Antiquities in America thing and really brushed it under the rug. They drew, there was a lot of drawings and things of these mounds, and they purposefully left so much detail out. um these things were primitive earthen, earthworks, as opposed to what they truly are and have been shown like by lidar to be significant structures and complexes underground that you're only seeing sometimes the tops or like the turrets of an entire wall system, and you're only going to see the two mounds on either end that were the turret, or were the kind of higher part of this,
Yeah,
because
they usually
there's
just say they're graveyards or tombs, which kind of
right.
takes away from all the other rich history that they could have been.
Right, and it makes it taboo, right? It makes
Mm,
it a like hallowed ground that you're not allowed to set foot on, or they make it a national park, or you know what I
mm,
mean? They make it a state forest. And I mean, I've got a state forest here in Iowa that if you saw this and you saw the arrangement of the oldest growth around, sits on top of this, on the like cusp of this hill that's just like this, and
mm.
it's a beautiful little hill, and it's the only place around for miles that has pine trees. Everything else
Oh
is kind
wow.
of oak and this and that. So you're looking at something, and you're just like, why is that? What's going on? And these trees are healthier and larger than anything else around. So you're going like, what is underneath here? Personally, I think that beneath our feet is the remnants of every civilization that has come before us. And I think that this mud flood idea is not far off from the ultimate truth. But from what I'm seeing, this doesn't happen all at once. This happens incrementally, and also the history is rewritten incrementally at the same time, as the landforms change, as the forest gets chopped down and used for industry. You lose the mythology, you lose the
Mm.
understanding of what that forest entailed, things like fairies, or different creatures that existed. Personally, I think that a lot of these creatures were different versions of humanity,
Mm.
right? um and that's the tricky part about the Tartaria thing. There's a lot of talk about giants is a big one. Why were the cities so big? What was going on here? What was happening?
Seen giant
Um,
books, giant doorways, and I've seen giant skulls. I've just never seen them in an actual museum. They've always been kind of
right,
like
and that's the type of
scrubbed
crap that the
away.
Smithsonian just
Yeah.
yeah that just wipe out. I mean, there have been so many instances of, at least reports anyway, of giant skeletons and things up to like
Mm.
30 feet being found, and
Yeah.
then these people get called and nothing else has ever heard of it again. And it's I would say it's a shame if it didn't make it so fun to look into.
Yeah,
You know
that
what I
is the
mean?
fun of it. Like it kind of like maybe when you first discover it, you're like, what the hell? Like they've been lying, but then it's like, wait, they've been lying. Like there's so much that we can discover, and like that kind of like flips it
Yes,
around, you know? Yeah,
absolutely, dude.
yeah,
And I'm beginning to understand that that's the fun of where we are, the
yeah, man.
stories.
Now I have a question that's a perfect segue because I was just listening to you speak with the guy behind the Missing the Point podcast. By the way, Randy,
Yeah,
I
Drew.
kind of I kind of skipped this over. Yeah, Drew Missing.
Yep.
I meant to ask you earlier, it's just we get so wrapped up in these fun conversations. But let people know really quick, what is your podcast called, what it's about, and then
Oh
I
yeah,
want to
for
ask you
sure.
about your most recent episode because it really struck a chord with me that I want to ask you
Awesome.
about. But
Awesome, definitely. Well, my podcast is the Red Thread Podcast, and dude, I love it. I've been doing it for about a year and a half. I've got a YouTube that is the same as my Instagram handle, and that'll all be in the show notes for everybody. But um, started about a year and a half ago. What it's about is kind of whatever I'm working through at the time. Over the past couple of years, there's been a significant amount of Tartaria, or what I call old world study, the study of history, the study of scripture. So there's a lot of these kind of inferences within the podcast and within some of the work that I've done and the conversations that I've had, my journey through sort of spirituality, awakening, the uplifting pattern of growth that you can call spiritual awakening, my journey through that. It's detailed relatively thoroughly, considering when I first started, I was like shook up all over the place, just finding my bearings. But this permits the listener to see the growth to look and see this guy was, wow, this really, in my opinion, wasn't all that great right at first, right? I hadn't learned how to cadence my speech. I hadn't learned how to do anything. I just needed to speak with people. I put it like this: I was grasping at straws, struggling for a chance to breathe in a world where we're drowning. And after listening to podcasts, this became my lifeline. I had an experience that I did share with Drew on that episode, my most recent episode, that involved essentially lights in the sky, kind of one of those summoning UFOs things, Dr. Greer and this and that. So that stuff happened to me, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had things to say about all of these topics. I was seeing a lot of uh, synchronisms in everything, a lot of cross-mogenating understandings that weren't being tied together, in any kind of way. So I needed to do that for myself. And so that's what I began doing a couple of years ago, with some really awesome assistance from absolutely everybody I've contacted in this whole game. It's so beautiful, dude. Like, started out,
Absolutely.
fringe stuff, mud floods, specifically, architecture, started out there, just led to so many different things, including my own enlightenment. And it's
That's
just
what I wanted
been
to ask you
amazing, dude.
about, because like I've been saying this a lot. Other people have been saying it, and it's kind of fun to imagine how far we've all come, even in just like the last 2 years and 3 years. But it's that concept of conspiracy leads to spirituality. You gotta
Right.
take the
Right. I
black
thought that
pill
was a
and you go through the
ploy.
whole.
I thought
Yeah.
that was just silly, at first. I mean, listening to, the typical Joe Rogan, Sam Tripoli, everything else. My first appearance on any podcast ever was on My Family Thinks I'm Crazy.
Oh, shout
So it
out
was
Mark.
yeah, shout out to Mark, dude. I mean, he brought me into this, and I really appreciate that. And there's a lot of people that have odds, or at odds, but I think that a lot of this is just an optics thing, right? People like chaos, people like disagreement, people like discord. They're drawn to it. And so it only makes sense that if you're going to draw people, you create some form of a chaos that needs to be resolved.
Need some
It's the
opposition.
flow. It's the
Yeah.
flow, dude. It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
flow. You create a void so that you can flow into it. And
Mm.
that's kind of how it works. But yeah, so I mean that got me into it. I don't even remember half the crap I was talking about. I
Oh,
mean,
that's all right. I
I
got a
was
more
talking
specific
about
question
like,
too. Like if it
yeah.
would help, like there's something about, okay, so like I think people go through this grieving process where it's almost like when you found out that Santa Claus didn't exist, and maybe you're like devastated, and then like all of a sudden you're angry, like how dare they lie to me about
Mhm.
that? And then you kind of realize like, wait, Christmas is magical even without Santa Claus. Like how crazy is that? And so like I've kind of felt like maybe I've been witnessing myself do this, and I'm now seeing other people thanks to, listening to your podcast today. I was like, wow, okay. What I'm seeing from your conversation is that, and people are going to have to listen to this to get the full context, but what I was noticing was that at first maybe it's upsetting and we're very drawn in to be like, what else are they lying to us about, and like this and that and chemtrails and like so many other topics that rile people up. And at the end of the day, you have to almost like kind of step back and be like, all right, I'm not going to become complacent, but I'm going to accept this darkness, because if what's the law of thermodynamics, if there's an equal opposite reaction, there has to be the opposing force. And even though I'm learning about all this darkness, there's got to
Yes.
be the equal matching light to
Yes,
complete
absolutely.
the spectrum. Yeah, it's exciting.
Absolutely. And I mean, dude, look at Star Wars, right? Have you
Right.
ever thought about the word Yoda and the word Vader?
No,
My
I
son
haven't.
brought this to my attention the other day. And I mean, I haven't even watched all the Star Wars with him, and he brings this up. I think maybe I've watched once with him. But he says, I was telling him about the letters of the word Yahweh, Yodha
Um,
Vedha.
yeah.
And he goes, Yoda Vader? And I said, holy shit. And this is right about the time I'm looking into tarot and the tree of life and all of this stuff, So I'm understanding a little bit about the duality dynamic, and then the third side of it, also known as like Christ or the child, right? You have the mother, the father, and the child. the child being the life that we're living. Our existence, we are all the child, right? And we have these forces, this duality that is the father and the mother. Now, the mother, or can be known as the great dragon Tiamat, or the serpent, right? Or the divine mother, or the holy mother. And then if you get it twisted into kind of modern theology, you have the Holy Spirit, right? You have the Holy Ghost, even if you go far enough into like the Catholic circles. So we have the death of the mother happening there. Now, is it any coincidence that through cabal and this and that, there seems to always be a sacrificed mother in order for the child to excel? This is not a coincidence. This is the story. This
Disney
is
does
this
this a lot. Even like Bambi, you know, they sacrifice Bambi's mom, and then
right,
that's the whole
right.
thing.
And I mean, look at the idea that almost anybody who gets famous nowadays, there's some situation with their mother, at least in the stories, right? Their mother dies and then they become famous, right? So this is it's all of the stuff out there. Hold on, this is smacking around. All of the stuff out there is not to be looked at or even considered in an external context. And this is the trippy thing about the world we live in. Everything you see external, gender confusion externally looks very chaotic. You start to turn that inward and you realize that, wait a minute, an element within me is the divine feminine, right? So it suddenly makes sense that there's this gender confusion aspect going on, predominantly with men leaning towards women, right? Because the divine mother has been dead. She's been the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost for as long as we can all remember. That was the teaching, and there's a reason for that. So the mother is dead. The serpent was killed, right? The snake was banished. Okay, so you have all of these things, and they all line up perfectly, and it's no mistake. And also the divine feminine has been excluded from all of our understanding. We have our Father who art in heaven. We have all of the Father. We have, right? We have all of these instances where it's always ever a father. Now, the closest thing to probably the multitude aspect of it is like Hindu understanding of different archetypes, right? So that has like, you have the base understanding of spirituality from our past, at least what we're told, the mother Earth, Tiamat, the great chaos dragon of the water that birthed the world through, get this, she births the world through her demise. And then her son is then the Lord of the land, which is made from the body of the mother. That's essentially what we're told we're within. And that's the Sumerian. So this is the going Kabbalistic kind of secret understanding, right? The Egyptian, Sumerian, Anunnaki thing.
Yeah,
So
the pattern is out there for sure. Yeah.
It's embedded in everything.
Yeah.
And once you see that, and then you look at Star Wars, you got Yoda, Vader, you got Yodha, Vedha, right?
Yeah,
And that's
so
Yahweh.
cool.
That's God, right? So guess what? God is both of those. God is not just Yoda, God is Vader, right? The epitome of darkness and the epitome of chilling and having a good time, right? Like just letting the world flow. So it's both of these things. And I think that this is where a lot of the confusion comes in as to who do we revere, right? Like there's a lot of drive to revere something.
I have
like,
a comment about that too, like because you had talked about the exclusion of the mother, and when I first moved to Texas, I became very familiar with the Latter-day Saints because there's a lot of missionaries around here, and I found out, just like you were saying, there's the Heavenly Father, but if you try to like talk about Heavenly Mother, it's not really a thing. I mean, it's like the Holy Spirit is, what they
right. She's been sacrificed.
Yes. And there's a really interesting, so like I was
for
trying
the
to search
Son,
this.
for the Son, and that's the crazy thing. Listen, the Holy Ghost is sacrificed for you. So guess what? Your essence, your spirit, of Great Spirit. The closest thing we have is Native American lore and legend of the Great Spirit. That's the closest thing we have to the reference of a mother,
You know what's
right? We have
funny
Mother
about
Earth.
that? So there, like, as I was searching for the Heavenly Mother, like in just like within Mormon cosmology, I was like curious, like what happened to the Heavenly Mother? And it led me to this news article. It's called Mormons to Mushrooms, and they basically have a group of renegade Latter-day Saints who were like, screw this, we're not going to stay in this church dogma. So they started eating mushrooms, and they made contact with the Heavenly Mother. And that's kind of going back to what you were saying about Native American systems and cosmology, because it's like, well, if you're consuming part of Mother Earth, then you're going to meet her face to face, and that's just
Yes.
like the way it is. And it was so cool.
Yes.
They finally broke out of Plato's cave. Like, no offense to anyone who's in LDS. I'm just saying, like,
Right.
these people, like
Or who's in dogma whatsoever. I mean, you have
any
to work, you
system.
have
Yeah.
to grow through
Yeah.
something or you grow with something. And that's
Right.
a personal preference. Absolutely. And more power to absolutely everybody out there for
Yeah.
doing what it is they do. Because listen, we're all unique. Like I was saying about those different perspectives, it's valuable. Um, and yeah, so there's been like the sacrifice of the mother, the kind of that concept rings really true in what we can call today's satanic circles, right? Because guess what? Whether anybody really wants it or not, Satanism or quote devil worship is just the next fad of a religion, right? It's the next understanding, along with transhumanism. So along with all these isms, right? That's all. Isms are very particular forms of understanding that essentially you can either get locked in or you can shut them out. But there's a very few people who decide that all of the isms need to be carefully considered and understood to be something, a piece of something that you need within you, right? Because you have to have balance. And so, this is where like personally I grew up knowing of the Holy Father and the Almighty, right? And the Holy Spirit, and so the Trinity. That's what I started when I was young. I was a young Christian going through that structure. And no, if you're not Catholic, there's no mention of a divine mother, right? Catholicism is a little bit upside down in the fact that they deny the other two for in lieu of the mother. So you've got this weird thing happening where inclusion isn't a thing. It's just not. Like it's either or, kind of like we were saying earlier. But no, it needs to be the end then. Now, what is the divine mother? You made a great point of speaking with her through psychedelics or through um we'll just say medicines from the earth. I've heard it from ayahuasca, mother ayahuasca.
Yeah, many
I've
ways to
heard.
alter your consciousness, even just through breathing,
I
just yeah.
personally, listen, I don't engage in any of those chemicals, but I do have a practice, right? And it turns out that once you have an intention, you can develop a practice, and once you have that practice, you can have an experience. And once you have that experience, you can reaffirm that experience over and over again until you grow to the next experience.
Well
And
said.
it's
Yeah.
incredible, absolutely
So
amazing. I
the
mean,
upward spiral.
dude, yeah, it's the opposite of everything we've ever been taught.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you know anything, both sides of each argument has to be had. So
Mm.
that's why we're talking about going through the darkness, right? And knowing when, like, you don't know when you're in it, you don't know when you're drowning by it. But as soon as your head pops above water a little bit and you breathe, you realize there's more than just the water you came out of, more than just the chaos, right? And I think that there's a certain dynamic when it comes to chaos and water and the divine mother that sort of had to split itself, right? The story of Tiamat, the great chaos dragon, is that this is a water dragon known as like the divine mother. She is killed by her son. Yeah, by her son. And she does have a great counterpart that is the divine father. They have a son. The son kills the mother to for some specific reason, but then the mother is split in twixt or separated. right? And in the void in the middle is where the sun makes his home and creates earth. That's essentially what is told in the Sumerian uh theology or cosmology, that the mother was sacrificed so that this reality could happen and so that we could experience the division that we're experiencing. That's why the separation is a part of that story. For us to experience separation, we have to lose the unity. And what is the unity but the mother? That's why, the symbol for mother is like typically a circle, right? And unity is the dot within the circle. So, there's all of these nods all over the place to all of this stuff. And but yeah, you've got to work through that darkness. And people are starting to talk about that a little bit more, about now that they experience it. I having experienced it, I can talk about shining through the darkness, being doubtful, absolutely confused, upset, overwhelmed a lot, underwhelmed a lot,
Hmm.
and just generally feeling chaotic going through it, but that is the water of chaos. And like, listen, at some point, and this is the old adage, you either sink or you swim, right?
Right.
It took me
Let
a
me
lot of
ask you
years.
about that because like there's something very relatable in your story and this overall concept. It's about initiation, and I know from Joseph Campbell that most of the initiatory practices were basically ripping a child from its secure maternal state where it's with
Mhm.
its mother and they have to leave her behind and go and become a man or a
Right.
full-fledged warrior, and that involves losing that maternal safety, that womb
Right.
energy, basically. And I'm
Yes.
sorry if my
Yeah.
cat's yelling into
No,
the.
that divine mother
Yeah.
essence. And this is the key reason why you can look at separation anxiety, which we all have. Don't get it twisted, everybody. We all have separation anxiety. That is the only kind of anxiety, the only kind.
Mm.
And I'm speaking from experience. It wasn't until I experienced connection, reconnected with this divine essence, the mother. Some people refer to it as Akasha, right? So that kind of leads into something I've got here for just a
Yeah, I'm
moment.
excited. Yeah.
And it's a name, right? Which is a tricky thing. To name things, to label things implies it implies
There's a lot in a name.
there's a lot, but it's so limiting,
It
absolutely
could be
limiting,
limiting. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
limiting. Because a name can mean something to you and mean something different to me.
Mm.
And this, I have a prime example for that. And yes, I do, on initiation, I do think every single last one of us is being initiated. For what? I don't know yet. But this, everybody, if you look into every religion that's handed down, every fiction that's handed down, you look into every history, you look into every aspect of this world that has been handed to us, and it screams the same thing over and over again. Find your way.
Mm.
You're not lost.
Know thyself.
Know thyself. You know what I mean? Seek and find. We have all of the things that have been handed to us that we need. It's just up to us to put them together and to stop discriminating and putting division up between us, because that's not the point of this place. Yes, it's there. Yes, it has been provided to us. But listen, it's been built for us to break the hell out
It's a
of. And
learning
that's
tool. Yeah. Yeah.
right. And you don't realize that when you're busy standing in the shit. You don't,
Mm.
all you know is it stinks and you want out of it. But imagine you're standing in a pile of shit and you don't know how to fucking step forward.
That's a funny
That's
metaphor. It's like the beginning of awakening is realizing that you're standing in a pile of shit and you're like, that smells. I want to go somewhere else. Or like, I want to get
yeah,
this off of
yeah.
me. Yeah.
And the first thought often is how do I escape? Is
Yes.
the moon a soul trap? What do I need to know in order to circumvent the moon and not come back to this
Yeah.
place again? So there's a lot of these thoughts, a lot of
Mm.
these thoughts of how to escape the chaos. And listen, man, I've tried. I've I've tried to
Mm.
escape the chaos. I have a, we'll just call it checkered past, and yes, symbolism intended. Okay. I have a checkered past. And those lights and darks have taught me, and the darkest being near death experiences,
Mm,
times that I should not. Listen, everybody, there's no reason I should be sitting here talking to all of you guys if only logic was king. But there happens to be a spiritual side of things, and there happens to be a reason that we're not allowed to see until we're ready for it. And that seems to be why I'm here.
mm.
I've had near death experiences. I should have been dead. There's no question about it. Self-inflicted death should have happened to me 3 or 4 times. And I know there's a lot of people out there that can kind of relate to that, that have their struggles, those deep struggles, and have had those touches with death that have brought them back and kind of set you back in the shit and said, listen, no, you
Mm.
got to learn to step forward. You're not just gonna fucking die in the shit. That's
Yeah, it's
not how
pushing
this
us
works.
forward. Are you familiar
Right.
with Wookie Foot, the music group?
No, I'm not.
They've got a really cool lyric, which I think relates to what you're saying. It's really simple. It's there's no way out, but there's a way in. And it's like
Yes.
we want to escape, but really what we need is to, not try to run away, not try to seek external almost like band-aids, which, I've gone through the same thing
Yes.
myself. And then
Yep.
you find out that the only place you can go, if you can't go down, you can't go up, you got to go in. And that's where all of our solutions lie. That's what basically, like, when people say conspiracy goes to spirituality, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what they're saying, I guess. But I'm
Oh no,
happy
that's a
you were
hundred
able
percent,
to
hundred
go through
percent.
this, because now you've been given a gift, and this is
Yes.
something that I've personally witnessed that you've shared with other people. Like, I was listening to you talk to our mutual friend Whitney Fox, and she had
Mm-hmm.
said something about, like, well, like, Randy, it's amazing that there are people on these platforms listening to us, and in this current moment, whenever this premieres on YouTube, someone will be sitting here like, wow, like, Randy, I've gone through the same thing. And that's just amazing. That's why storytelling is so shamanic and so
Yeah,
powerful.
and I have the absolute need and desire to serve because and I was talking to Nico and Rosie Court, shout out to them, on Upstate Unconventional earlier today, and we're talking about the word deserve, right? And I said, listen, you just need to throw that word away. Deserve is a loaded word. It starts off with D, which removes the serve from it, right? It's an asinine word. Listen, you can serve and you can reserve servitude for yourself as long as you're serving. Okay, it's an Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its own tail. It's an infinity symbol. It is all of these things, and you have to become it. You have to become not stuck in a loop, but you have to become that upward spiral that someone else might need. Like for all the times that I shouldn't be here, it has shown me and has given me this gift of understanding that darkness isn't the answer, death isn't the answer. You can't escape this initiation, this growth that we are going through. There are many that would beg to differ and would say, well, what about these people that died doing this or these people that died doing that? In my humble opinion, listen, there are experiences that need to be had. For what sake? Data collection, whatever, however you want to look at it. The universe is about experience. It's about doing, right? That is what material life is. It's experience of manifestation, of growth, of and we're not talking linear motion like horizontally. No, this is an ever loudening sound that we're all creating here. We're all creating this beautiful symphony. And listen, when part of us are out of tune, the whole orchestra goes out of tune. And that is the time period that we are coming out of right now.
Kali Yuga.
That being out of tune, 440 hertz, etc., is what we're coming out of now. Now you can indulge in sound healing sessions at the proper, the proper tones and the proper frequencies. You can do a lot of these things for yourself in your own home now through just chanting through. I mean, and so these things, these information that is only available to you once you step outside of the box or the cube or the Saturnian mindset or the scarcity mindset. It's all available to you. And it's not about deserve. Deserve is living in the box. Okay. You deserve, if you live in the box, you deserve to live in the box, and then you deserve to live in the box. But listen, when you reserve your place outside of the box, you then must serve. You then must do that for somebody else, which has been done for you. Like for me, having experiences, having confirmations come through podcasts and this and that, it was only natural
Mm.
that I step into that and provide that for some other me, some other me out there. And I've had a few emails over the last year and a half that have just, man, brought me to tears. I'm just like super grateful to have heard what I had to say. And so these moments are so crucial, dude, like so crucial in our growth and our understanding. And there is that first catalyst, that first time you hear something that confirms something within you that you've been carrying around and burdened by and scared and worried that what people think or this and that, so you take a chance. Somebody says, hey, listen, I heard this podcast, you should check it out. You take a chance, you invest your time and that moment to listen, right? To shut up and listen. Because on a podcast, you can't talk out, you have to listen. You got to
Right.
absorb it. So that's teaching you something else at the same time. I lose that skill from time to
I always
time, but
joke with people like, well, I name my podcast local listens. Hopefully it's gonna make me a better listener over time.
dude,
Yeah.
oh man, I have, and it's rough though. It's tough to learn about
Mhm.
yourself. That's a very difficult thing at first, right? For the first couple of few years, maybe it's gotten a lot
Yeah.
easier, over the very
There's
recent
something really special though,
past.
because like when you're all fired up and you want to say something, like I know for me, like when I'm in a really good conversation, I'm like constantly trying to butt in, and like I have to really, really control myself because I'm such an
It's
energetic,
tough.
like, yeah.
It's so
But
tough,
that's
dude.
what's exciting. Like that's how we know we've hit gold, because it's like, man, there's so much to say. So as
Yes.
a means of a segue, you had texted me earlier today, and I was really happy that you did, because you basically brought up the fact that, spontaneously these maybe you want to call them divine or esoteric revelations can just come to us. People call them
Yes.
downloads, which is a
Yes.
fun technical term. It's like we connect to the ethereal Wi-Fi and we
Intuition,
download
right?
something. Yeah, you
I think
intuit
there's a
something.
difference. Yeah, I think there's a
Yeah.
difference between intuition and like a download or like Akashic.
Hmm.
Intuition is something that you kind of can carry with you all the time. I've heard it called in like tarot circles, your secret agent that lives within you. You know what I mean? The man within the man.
The
And
daemon.
it turns out there are many within us. It turns out that each of our energy centers has a personality of its own, and that we grow through these energy centers. We start out at the base or the root when we're a baby, and we're everything's material, and we're touching and eating and feeling and expressing and crying, and everything is very, very material and very dense. We come up to, when we come of age, we become sexual in nature. Develop this prowess and this will. So from sexual, then becomes will. From will, then becomes feeling. Right? You get to a point where you want a relationship with somebody, right? Because you're beginning to open your heart chakra. You really crave that attention and that intention. So you're opening your heart. You're learning that. You get to a point where maybe you've heard something that you connect with, and you need to reach out and communicate with somebody else in order to bring that understanding closer. So that's opening your throat chakra. These are all personalities. These are all levels within our personality. These all have a voice in our head. Um, Many of us are familiar with the voice from our loins, right? Like we're very familiar with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be creating other people. We're familiar with certain voices, certain compulsions, right? And so you get up further, and you learn, then after you learn to speak, you begin to learn to think. First materially, right? And then you begin to learn to think spiritually, which is kind of back and up out of the top of the head. So you're thinking thoughts that are above you, that are beyond you. So there's reasons that things are phrased certain ways, but so you develop these personalities within yourself, and you develop an understanding of what each personality does, how to turn each personality on and off. And at some point, maybe you turn all the personalities on at the same time, and you have worked them out to where they're not in conflict within you, and you have what is now called the teacher within,
Mm.
or the intuition.
I like to call
Because
that a flow state too.
yes, the flow state is a product of your intuition, but
Mm.
intuition, more as I'm talking about, is the ability to actively and effectively process many different aspects or concepts. Just a moment, please.
Yeah, like simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah. So just one moment.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry about the alarm. I gotta turn
No
off. I
worries.
guess I didn't turn off the thing when with the pies. So
All good.
okay, there we go. Perfect. All
Yeah,
right.
man.
So anyway, you turn these on, you develop an intuition, which becomes, instead of your daemon, instead of your automatic voice that we are programmed with, that many of us takes the shape of media and
Mm.
these different aspects and different negativities and things that we allow ourselves to absorb, whether we realize it or not. Whether, we turn on a TV and we realize we're absorbing FU and FDAS and GD and all this other stuff just flowing right into us, because guess what? We're a vessel. So we become filled up, and you can fill yourself up with the wrong things. So you got to clear all that out first. And that's that stepping through the shadow, or stepping up or rising above it. So many things, ascending, right?
Mm.
So a lot of people have this idea of ascension as like, listen, I'm going to float out of my body, and I'm going to fly up to heaven in just an energy body. While that may be true to some extent at some point, right? Possibly upon mortal death,
Right. Yeah.
the ascension that spoke about in mystery teachings is not quite that. It has
Mm.
to do with a very uh,
It's subtle.
tangible, a very
Yeah.
tangible process that is within you as you are,
Mm.
right? Come
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
are. Um, and and when you get to that point, you develop that intuition, and becomes becomes the voice of reason
Yeah,
instead
man.
of the voice of conflict,
Yeah.
right? And you feed that by removing barriers wherever you can. Say you have a
Mm.
barrier and it's unclean water or unclean food or
Right. Or
unclean
something that you
media.
brought up earlier too, were the chakras, and like the heart chakra is like the gateway to the higher realms. Like
Right,
if
you
the
got to
heart
hit
is
that
blocked,
first. Yeah.
yeah, and like that's
and,
where I
and
think a lot of people get stuck, is they maybe they are consuming fluoride, or they have like CNN on all day or something, and it's blocking up this heart
yes,
passageway. And if they can open that up and let go,
right, because they're
the
taught not to
rest will flow.
feel.
Right.
Yes, you're taught from a very young age not to feel. You're given pills so that you do not feel. You are essentially poisoning yourself because you do
Mm.
not want to feel. You become an escapist like me, like I have been, because I didn't want to feel. Because the only experiences with feeling that I had were relatable only to sorrow, due to the teachings I had learned through media,
Mm.
the things that I had absorbed through other people. By being in a negative mindset, you start feeding yourself negativity. You
You got to
start
work to
consuming that.
reprogram yourself, and it sounds like today, thanks to that, because it's not easy, man. You had to go through a lot of strenuous work to get here. And today, I think serves as an example for, you were able to access the intuition that is so easily lost by
Oh yes.
let's just say, people in their day to day. And what actually happened to you today? I'm really curious, because you've kind of
Oh
touched on
well.
it. You've like
Yeah,
teased on
yeah,
it
no
a little
doubt.
bit, and I'm like really
Yeah,
curious
no
to
doubt.
what kind of happened. Yeah.
So just to kind of explain, my process is kind of developed generically, or like on its organically rather. Over the last probably 5 years. Started out with something simple as like doing a salutation to the different cardinal directions and a attempt to connect with spirit, right? And this was like 5 years ago. I felt something in doing that, which led to, meditation, which led to me asking the question of the universe that I explained in the beginning of the episode. And over time, I've just been able to develop what I need when I need it. So develop my toolkit. And if you've ever been in recovery, you learn about a toolkit, you learn about the 12 steps, you learn about these things. And there's actually a really good purpose for something like the 12 steps. Um, and it's to restructure your mind. It's to get you more in touch with yourself on a number of different levels, like 12 different levels, 12 different exercises you go through, you work through. I was never a big fan of the actual process itself. It didn't, didn't do anything for me, but I understood the concept, right? I understood what was trying to have been done there. And fortunately for me, I had profound experiences connecting with spirit. Initially started off, with a Christian background or base. I've always been fascinated with shamanism and all of that. When I was younger, I just hadn't developed enough to really dig into it. I didn't have enough real world experiences or even book knowledge or understanding of different facets of life. So I couldn't see the whole shine of the whole, crystal ball. I was only looking at small parts of it. But I like the idea of connecting with spirit. And that came from probably always having the fascination, right? First of all. And secondly, like psychedelic experiences will throw that door open for you. I had an experience with something called Datura when I was much younger, and this is also known as Hell's Bells or Angel's Trumpets. And I don't recommend it to anybody unless you are getting it from a shaman. So please, folks out there, don't get crazy just because it's essentially common herb that can be found. This was so powerful that I've always in the back of my mind had the understanding that what we see in this world is not all there is, because that certain compounds open the portal. They open your door wide open, right? Mushrooms is another one, right? And people are more familiar with that. You understand that there is a door opening and you're perceiving something else that is always there. It doesn't go away when you come down. You just no longer are tuned into it. You're no longer vibrating with that very tangible vibration. If you've ever had an epic mushroom experience, you understand exactly what I'm saying. And if you haven't, please consider meditation prior to, indulging in psychedelics, because believe it or not, you can gain a similar effect or affect through ritual channels.
Yeah, we are
Right.
in control of our brainwaves,
And our chemistry
and our
and our chemistry.
biochemistry. Yeah.
Yeah. And chemistry is super important. Your brain chemistry in particular. This is why I stopped taking antidepressants about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right around the time I started doing this. I started becoming fulfilled in what I was doing. I started no longer having the need to numb myself. Right. So you can't just jump off the bridge. Like you got to make sure that you got a soft landing first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before you take that leap. But it is a leap of faith, for me to put down the Prozac, which is a fluoride derivative, from what I understand, was profound. And the reason I thought to do that was because when I had initially had my meditative experience and connection with the universe, I had been off of that medication for a month or two in that period of time, but then started taking it again after that. So when I got that confirmation through Robert Bigelow on the Joe Rogan podcast, talking about bubbles and bubbles, I never did tie that together. He says, "Oh, to the world, if you can imagine bubbles on bubbles," is what he says to Joe Rogan. And so my mind just, it blew right at that moment. And I knew there was something to meditation, and I knew there was something that I could do to access that, to gain entry, right? And so I've been meditating a few times a day. Sometimes when I'm at work, you can call it a meditation, kind of a state that I go into where I'm able to work things out. It's a very monotonous job. So like many out there, I've had an opportunity to reflect, an amazing opportunity to look within, because there's nothing else to do for 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, nothing else to do but think, look inward. And I'm super grateful for that. And, I never used to be. I used to think it was stupid and didn't want any part of it and just wanted to get home and get stoned and, you know what I mean, watch TV and pass out. And, a lot of people can relate to that also. But so through that, kind of a long story long, through that, I learned to meditate. I learned to focus my intention, develop not even a specific set of rituals. It's different every time. Anytime I want to go into a meditation, it always looks different. So I never know what I'm going to do. And generally, it's kind of like a prayer combined with maybe a dance of some kind, combined with a speaking of some kind. So it has all of the elements. And that's something that I'm just realizing as I'm saying this to you, to be honest. Like I didn't consciously put this process together. It just came to me. It started off very simple, still is very simple. In fact, I'm super blessed and fortunate and have been given such gift that I'm able to tune into this almost whenever I need to. I would dare say whenever I need to. And it's not always when I want it, right? And that was super tricky to get around for like the last year, because it started right around the time I stopped taking those medications. I started to be able to access this a little bit better, to have a little bit of volume on the voice of reason, as opposed to just the screaming demon or program voice that we all have within us if we partake in media. That's why media is magic. It's installing programming within you. So you go in, you fix your programming, you get it dialed into a point where it works for you, which is where I'm at. Then you come to a day where perhaps you sit down one morning before you do anything else and you think about a topic. You don't even know what topic you're going to think about. You just allow yourself the space to think, imagine, process, kind of do your ritual, get in a flow state. So you can literally feel your energy channeling through you, right? You can feel it rolling. And very kind of a similar feeling to something you might experience with a certain compound, right? Like, I don't know, MDMA or psilocybin or whatever. You begin to roll. That's where the term comes from. It's you're seeing your energy that is always there.
The
Um,
tide starts coming out. Yeah, it starts to roll out. Yeah.
it's a rolling. It's a toroidal field, right, within you. And so in your mind's eye, it's very central. So you're able to feel the flow and see the flow if you allow yourself the opportunity to be patient and be consistent and disciplined. These are all things that have come before the fact, before the ability. It's not something you can just jump into like many books might tout. Hey, here, say this prayer and you have access to unlimited information. Ta-da. Like, no, it's not quite that simple. But if you do all the prerequisites, it is. And many books will have that later in the book, right?
Yeah,
But
man. Yeah.
most of us won't get all the way to that
Oh
point.
no, it
We'll
takes a while. And yeah, I think that's you've summarized that very well. Like this is it's almost like you have to establish your routine, and then once you practice and practice, things start happening. And I'm curious, after, kind of establishing this habit, what had happened to you today?
So I was meditating this morning, and I found myself in a state that has become comfortable and beautifully familiar. I'll just say, and it's been a significant amount of patience on my part. From what I feel, I have guides, okay, and these guides are there to bring me through this experience, this uplifting trend that I'm on, this path that I'm walking. And it started out with me simply asking Christ or Jesus to lay the path ahead of me. And that chokes me up for very good reason too, because I had been laying my own path much to my own detriment for a very long time. And so I requested that in all earnestness, lay the path before me that I may walk it. And that was how it started. And this was probably 6 or 7 years ago. So like I said, patience is a huge part of this. It's not going to happen overnight, but you will get cues to understand that you're on the right path. They will come more and more frequently, until you find yourself immersed in a beautiful thing called life. And it's so there's no separation between the life that you're living externally and your internal life. It becomes one, and there's no separation between you as a person and the you in your dreams. I've had an experience very recently that I never had before, where I saw my own face in my dream. And so that was like a super profound thing that happened to me just days ago. So I'm coming to understand that I'm getting some cohesion, some coherent kind of sense. And so coming to that understanding has been amazing. It was scary at first, when the door swung open, when I had performed some sigil magic. And this was like a month and a half ago, and I essentially created a sigil to activate my psychic prowess, and that can mean spiritual prowess. Doesn't have to mean, like many people think, reading people's minds or anything like that. My intention was to establish connection, and to establish a consistent connection that never left me. And I did this at night before bed one night, and I had been familiar with meditating for many years, right? And had profound experiences, but I needed a consistent and constant connection in order to continue the work, in order to continue what in alchemy is called the great work or hermetic teaching, the progress of the soul. And coming to know that that is a thing outwardly by reading, Manly P. Hall and looking at conspiracy. And I mean, everything is leading up to, your logical mind knows it. I've had some semblance of spiritual connection, so I felt it, right? My heart was open, my mind was now open. Now I had to exercise the will. And part of exercising that will is outwardly extending that. How do you do that? You do it through shapes, you do it through sound, right? That's part of what ritual is. Or you do it through iconography, symbols. So I created a symbol on a piece of paper one night before bed. Essentially, I am psychic, pushed my will into that symbol, and let it sit on the floor beside my bed overnight. And the next morning when I woke up, I had a sense of connection that was fleeting up until that point, would kind of come and go, of course, at moments when I needed it. But it was probably frustrating to me. It was frustrating to me to not have a solid grasp on that. I felt that I needed that for my journey to continue to grow. So I got into something that I never would have done when I was inside my dogma. I never would have toyed with shape power or sigil magic. Never would have thought to do that in my previous understanding. But through the old world study, the study of esoteric teachings, hermetic teachings, etc., and I mean the list goes on, guys. I've been studying and studying every single day for probably 2 years solid now, trying to get the symbolic language down and understood. So that's also important. You need to understand the language of symbols, how they work, how it could work for you. So there's a lot of different parts to this, but like magic, the following day I had a sense of connection. And this was probably a month, maybe a little more than a month ago, a month and a half, maybe. And since then, every time I've gone within to check, that connection has been active. So it's gotten, clearer and become more like habitual and understood. And through that understanding comes familiarity. And then through that familiarity comes, a constant connection, comes communication, right? And it's not like it's always on. It's a channel of communication. When you are extending a thought, feeling, etc., you will cause an effect in the ether that radiates back to you the sympathetic vibration of that, right? So that's a very important part, I think, just to let people know, is that it has to be sympathetic. It has to be from a place of love. Doing it from a place of fear, which I have done, requesting these gifts from a place of fear doesn't work. And it's why it took me so long to be able to extend the symbol and expect and understand that I would receive the result. You have to throw deserving out the window, like I was saying earlier.
That's why the Star Wars myth is so spot on, because it's like fear will lead people to the dark side, and
right? And
keeping love
there
alive
is magic. There is a magic in the dark side, but it's at the cost of others.
Yeah, it's very
It's at
dangerous.
the cost of others. It's what is kind of understood as, all right, when you don't have love, you have equivalent material exchange. That's alchemy in that sense. Now, the beautiful thing about love or gold is it allows alchemy to happen, or the sorcerer's stone rather, sorry, um, which can be symbolized as gold essentially. It's been known to have been, but the sorcerer's stone is love. Like, listen, you do, and I didn't realize that until very recently. That that love is that catalyst that allows you, it permits you, because once you're in a place in your heart where you really wish no ill, you wish for progress, you wish for the righteous things. When you're righteous in your heart, um, those doors open. You ask and you find, you seek and you find, you knock and that door is open to you. So it wasn't until all of those things came into line that I had an experience this morning. Um, and I know this has gotten long, but I wrote down, don't forget to elaborate, which which
I
is
can
funny
remind you
for
later
me.
to elaborate.
But you know, and it's but I mean, I think I've done a lot of the elaboration up front, so I think that that's good. But so that brings me to an experience that I can describe as though which it has actually happened to me. So I've had a lot of questions lately for my guides, like what their names are, and I've been given roundabout answers a lot of times, humorous answers enough to make me laugh, but realize that uh, the name of an entity is oftentimes more than we can understand.
Hmm.
Especially when you're dealing with like on the plane of higher spirit, higher power. Um, if you look into the Apocrypha, you'll find that when I forget who it was, had this experience going through the seven heavens and meeting different entities on every level. When he gets to the very first one above Earth, and remember in Kabbalah or the Tree of Life, above is within.
Hmm.
Okay, that was the biggest thing that I had misunderstood for so long. I was praying outward for so long, screaming outward. Outward is the void. Outward is nothing but reflection. Okay, so you don't scream outward, you speak inward, right? And as soon as you know that, like, it's a game changer, ultimate game changer for me. And I didn't know that until like probably just a few months ago. So I was speaking outward, so that's why I was getting a spotty connection, right? Like that's why I was getting breakup and static and false thoughts popping in,
Yeah.
or
And
other
back to what you said
daemons.
earlier too, you try to name your guides, and like naming things isn't always like,
Right.
it isn't always
But you want to, you're
you want
just
to, of course.
you're
Oh,
just
I don't blame
compelled,
you at all. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you want to know who you're speaking with, and that's
Right.
kind of a human condition. But once I learned that no matter what I may call them, he, she, it, they, the all, everything, it would always be an then. And so that's, once I realized that, I'm like, oh well, then it's not something that matters.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
like you're
something
not
that
speaking
matters.
to a noun, you're speaking to a verb.
And then, yeah, and
Yeah,
then a noun, and then, so I mean, it's all
right.
of these things. And when you realize that, you're like, this can go on circularly forever.
Yeah.
So it's not accomplishing anything. That what is your name thing began to run in its own type of cycle. I was getting
Interesting.
hung up on it, and
Interesting.
so I did away with that, and um, sort of did away with the reaching into the Akashic record as I had read it in books. I had read that there's a gateway prayer, that you say this prayer and it opens this record to you. I guess I had a certain idea of what that looked like in my head, of what that would be like. And it wasn't far off once I developed the skills to create that circumstance for it. You have to learn first how to visualize things, which is a lot harder than people think. You start off, can you visualize an orange?
That takes a lot of
Can
concentration, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, but it's the weirdest thing. Like, it takes concentration, yes, but it takes ease. It
Oh
takes
yeah, yeah.
it takes just joy. It doesn't even take difficulty, and that's the part
Yeah.
I struggle
It's
with
like
for
a
so
Taoist
long.
principle. Like you can't
Dude,
force it. It's
stop
like a movement.
trying. You
Yeah.
got to stop
Yeah.
trying. And like, but meanwhile, so what do you have to do? You have to condition yourself to always be trying, to always be
Mm.
on, right? And that's what I've been doing at work, mindful practices while I'm working. Anytime I had an opportunity, and had a thought of my past or of a certain situation that might occur. Why am I thinking that?
Yeah.
What is the point to that thought? You've got to go through these processes, but then you get to a point where you can visualize,
Right.
and
So
and you
wait.
can.
I'm kind of lost though. So just to kind of organize, because I feel like I picked up on your thread, but then I lost it at some point. I just want
No,
to
it's fine
clarify.
because I
Yeah.
haven't even actually started
Oh,
with it
okay.
yet. But
Oh, I just felt
so I'm just
confused for a
trying
second.
to,
So sorry
yeah,
about
I'm
that.
just trying to process out that there's so much behind all of this.
For sure. Of
It's not
course.
as though I'm sitting in a room with another person who says, "Bam, here's your vision," or or seeing a vision so clearly that it looks like a movie. And that's
Mhm.
stated a lot in books. Imagine a screen in your mind and you project onto that screen this or that. So it's worded very simply, right? Imagine this. All right, do this now. And like they don't tell you the part that's like, in order to imagine a screen, you have to learn to visualize that screen. And in order to visualize anything appearing on that screen, you have to learn to project images from within. And that's takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of
Right.
practice to get to that point where you're effortlessly able to let that energy flow and paint on the canvas that is your inner self, your
Yeah, man.
mind's
That makes
eye,
sense. Yeah.
right? But you do get to that point, and I'll just relate that to everybody out there. If you keep going and you keep the curiosity and you keep the intention and the drive and the motivation, I mean, initially all I had to like outwardly pray for was motivation. Listen, I've got a couple things going. Once I had the podcast going, I just pray for motivation. Continue to push me, Lord, because I need this, right? Because you're coming from a place of a humble connection with something, a loving connection in the best intentions, right? I know the road to hell is paved with good intentions and all that, but listen, when you have the best intentions, the highest intentions, you will progress. You will stumble, you will fall, you will progress inevitably, as long as your heart's in that right place. So once you get there, so once you get there, you wake up one morning, you look at your calendar, and you're like, "Oh man, I've got this podcast with local listens later. I got to talk to Jake. All right." And I didn't even so much have the thought of what are we gonna dig into? What am I gonna talk about? It was more of a kind of a morning thing I have where I like to explore where my mind goes. That's the first thing I do in the morning, is see what comes up, because it's always something cool, always something interesting. I found interest in some very awesome things, from from fiction to fact to history. I mean, you name it, I've dove into it in the last few years. So I've got a lot of stuff kind of in there that I've read about, seen information on, but haven't connected within myself yet. And the Akashic record is one of those things. I hadn't connected it with my guidance yet, with my meditation. I hadn't gotten there yet. I was busy, building up the foundation for it, but I didn't realize that I was building the foundation for it. I was just one experience at a time, having fun with it, kind of being eased into. I'm very, blessed that my guides are very patient and understanding. They are there when I'm ready, right? And I think this applies for everybody. Your guidance will be there when you are ready. But like that first part is knowing. And how do you know? You study to find out reasons why for your logical mind. So you have all these things. You do all these things. You get to a point where you sit down and you can finally begin to imagine with your mind's eye, right? An infinite bookshelf or a series of shelves or file cabinets or drawers, right? Or facets. Facets is a good one. If you've ever seen a multifaceted stone, it's a different face, right? So you imagine infinite facets out in front of you, around you, forever in all directions. Now, each of these facets will then signify a classification. It can be in time, it can be in space, it can be on subject matter, it can be a lifetime, it can be an experience, a personality, a certain archetype or a thing, etc. But it's always flowing within itself. very fractal essence, very similar to the picture behind you there, which I have actually encountered
Yeah,
personally.
shout out to Alex Gray.
Yeah, I have encountered that exact
Yeah. But wait, let me ask you,
version of a
man.
being personally.
Like
But
if you're describing the story about what happened to you this morning, like are you saying you were actively visualizing the Akashic bookshelf, if you will? Like,
for the
we can
first
call it
time
that.
ever, yes, for the
Nice,
first time
nice.
ever,
Yeah, man, tell
and
us. Like I'm very eager. This
it,
might be my like slightly caffeinated self kind of
no,
like
dude,
I'm
I'm
so
just
eager
blown
to
away
like
by it.
learn
I
about
was
this.
so
Yeah.
excited to have it and to have the experience to share.
Hmm.
And it was purpose built for this moment. So I'm just, so stoked. So each of these facets or these different spirals within spirals, these different points, right? Each one signifies a concept, basically. And if you've ever been in a psychedelic experience, you know that there are many points of movement. There are many hubs of many wheels, right? So each one of these hubs of these wheels signifies a filing cabinet or a subject or some kind of a concept. Now it's forever in all directions, right? A hall of mirrors, if you will. And within that hall of mirrors, um, as far as the mind can perceive, right? As far as you're allowing yourself, which means stretching onward and upward and downward and even inward back to you, to your most inner center that you currently reside in. So even inward. Now, what you see is the center is where being lies. Okay. The center is the center that you see beyond you is different from your persona's center, your personality center, or your consciousness's center, your particular consciousness center. Okay. And it signifies the center of all others. So this center within you is actively projecting the center that you perceive as outside of you. Okay. Because it is much like our cosmos around us. We can get into that later. It is a reflection of everything that you hold within, which is why you have to look inward to find this outward expression. So it's kind of confusing if you're not there yet. But let's see. So it's like I was saying, a mirror of your own center. Okay. And I know it's very difficult to have that picture. But if you listen to this and you've got an opportunity to close your eyes and kind of go through that with me, perhaps you can. So now next, imagine that the central point I just spoke of, uh, outward in front of you or beyond you, we'll call that the vanishing point, right? Just like it is in perception, just like it is when you look down the road all the way to the horizon, it's a vanishing point. So you can, at a minimum, folks can imagine that outward expression that I've just, entailed. So imagine a road with the vanishing point far off in the distance. Above you, as a ceiling, is fractal patterns that are cabinets along both sides also. So you're going through a tunnel, basically. It's perceived as a tunnel. So that vanishing point, out of that vanishing point beyond you come waveforms or patterns or cones. Okay, cone is a good one, but the cone is not a solid cone. It is an ever moving. Everything in the consciousness is always moving, always changing, forever and always. Okay, so it's vibrating outward from the vanishing point, right, beyond you, and reaching in, kind of like in Donnie Darko, the will that he sees out in front of him,
Yeah.
pulling him forward, similar to that concept. Or if you've ever seen the movie The Abyss, right, you have the water that takes on the form of a face or, a tentacle. A tentacle is a good one. That's one they like to scare us with, right? So you see these tentacles or these cones or these strings coming from the vanishing point. This is the first time I've ever seen this or perceived this. And those strings or threads are threads of action. Okay, they're in the act of doing something, so they might even be considered red threads. Okay, so they're they're symbolically linked to the act of doing, And these threads basically find a subject or a position and extract information from the all, which is the infinite filing cabinet of the universe. Now, we often like to think of the Akashic record as being 100% consciously aware and motivated through our personality to reach our physical hand out and grab this information and pull it back into our physical mind. That is a misunderstanding, I guess.
And to
Because
clarify, like, are you imagining like, if you're gonna reach out and grab something that like in your
that
brain,
happening
let's
in
say.
the reverse, in the
Oh, okay.
reverse, this
I
thing
see.
coming out of the vanishing point. So if you're on a road down at the end of the horizon, something coming out of the horizon, and then just reaching off to the side and plucking something out of one of these cabinets and
Mhm.
returning back to
Do
the
you
vanishing
imagine
point.
kind of like, if you have a thought, like I'm gonna think about reaching out and grabbing something it's like we have neurons that start at a central point and then they spread out and they
Or strings, right?
strings, yeah,
So
like the
and
red
it ties into
thread.
quantum theory. It ties into quantum theory, string theory. The idea of the silver thread of consciousness comes
Mm,
often in the subject of the Akashic record, and it is our connection. It is it is what binds us all together. It is
yeah.
the tie that binds us, right?
It's interesting too
Um,
that when people have astral travels or out of body experiences, they're connected to their physical
correct.
body through like a thread of some kind.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So while I didn't actually see any physical bodies or people, I saw what I understood as threads of others
Mm,
reaching in to willfully and actively extract information from this medium that we call the ether, or
interesting.
I like to refer to her as the mother or Akasha.
She's the great librarian.
She's been called many things. She
Yeah.
is the all mother,
Right.
right? Everything that has ever or ever will happen is within her.
Mm,
Okay. So in that perception, you see these kind of threads or cones or string, or arrows, right? It's been portrayed as arrows in a lot of like Aboriginal art and things like that. So there's that. And of course, yes, some have called it the silver thread, and I'm referring to it as an action that is taking place. Now it's tricky because this action takes place outside of time and space. So that's why there's no separation between when we have a thought and when our next thought regarding that thought comes in. It's almost immediate, when we're operating within
and
our
then
intuition. That's
and
the flow
then
state. Yeah. And then and so you're in that flow state, and then more, and then next, and
Mhm.
always, and then forever, and then um so out of that center that you see beyond you, like the spokes of a wheel, right? These threads are other, and this might get confusing, are other and therefore your units of consciousness reaching into the subconscious,
Mm,
right? Or the Akashic record, or the void, or the 0 point. Um, I perceived it as emerging from the 0 point, extracting and returning to the 0 point. Just like we come from the 0 point, are born, and then die and return back to the 0 point. So it's the same thing that's happening everywhere on all levels. And so they appear as motion, from the center outward, which is why that wheel, the wheel of life or the flower of life, is such a profound symbol, because it signifies the very act of being in
mm.
so many ways. And that's what I kind of perceived in this. And of course, yes, this is all taking place kind of outside of what we know as space time, right? So you can imagine a point inside of a circle with arrows radiating outwards. Um, and within those arrows is the activity or the motion that signifies being.
Mm.
So it's that motion, which is always forever, signifies being. And as it reaches to the outside or the filing cabinets, it then extracts and instantaneously pulls that information to the center, right? So when you are centering yourself, when you're meditating, when you're learning to center your energy, you are drawing, condensing yourself. You're making yourself more whole,
Mhm.
right? Because you're drawing inward so that you can reflect on yourself more clearly. You're bringing it in where you can perceive it better, where you can go through it better. That's what meditation is, right? Um, so these threads are all busy, right? Attaching, detaching. Um, while attached, they look like funnels or grasping hands, grabbing the info that they and it gets weird again. They're for yourself. Okay, everything that you see external is a reflection of what's going on. So I'm basically being shown the process that I'm engaged in extracting this information. And so it's super weird. It's much like a mirror, mirror world.
Mhm.
Like, have you ever stood in a mirror and you fold the two mirrors back behind you?
Oh
So you
yeah,
had
you
one of the,
see like
and you
infinite.
see just,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
it's like that. That's, so there isn't just one vanishing point, but if you decide that you want to make one there for
Mhm.
perception's sake, you can, once you learn to visualize. So it seems that that's what I did.
It's
But they're
interesting.
coming, the strings are coming out, they're attaching to information, pulling it in, and this is always happening for all of us all of the time. And this is the biggest misnomer that I was like, well, I need to talk about that.
Mm.
Because every time we have an intuition, every time we have an inspiration, every time we have a musing,
Mm.
we are engaging with this.
That's one
So
of
it's
those
not
threads
just
grasping onto something that we can pull back. And you kind of brought this up earlier, like when you wake up in the morning and you're allowing yourself to spontaneously and intuit something, it's like you're resting in that center zone and then you're allowing your inner thread to like grab something, pull it back to you, and it's like you're allowing it to happen. It's not like you're forcing it, you're like allowing
right.
this
Yes, you are
process.
allowing
Yeah.
it to happen. And you're also taking advantage of the fact that as soon as you wake up for about a half an hour, you're in an altered state of consciousness.
Yes.
Most of
Your
us don't
DMT is
realize
higher.
this. Yes,
Yes.
most of us don't realize this. And DMT and serotonin are closely linked.
Mm,
So what happens is you start perpetuating this beautiful cycle of
mm.
serotonin release, of DMT release at night. Therefore, you learn that it's coming. You learn to expect it. You learn to anticipate it, and then therefore you learn to allow it.
Mm.
And that's what kind of disconnects people from the Akashic record. And this is why I needed to frame that word with the experience I just shared with
Yeah,
you.
for sure. You did a great
It,
job explaining it because now I'm like imagining not like a scary kind of octopus, but more of like this like spiritual archive, but it's being we interface with this vast etheric
through
library.
our quantum strings, right? So there is
Yes.
language for this.
And
Finally,
it's
we're at
so
a
cool that
beautiful
you
place.
do the Red Thread podcast because that's kind of like I'm imagining now, like, we're each tapping into the Akashic Library through our own threads. And, tonight we've really been able to access like very unique states of consciousness just through conversation. And the way that you told this story has given me a new visual. It's
Awesome,
very
dude. Yes,
interesting. Yeah.
epic. And see, that was something that I struggled with. You know, I struggled a lot with that when I was first starting out. So I'm
Mm,
glad to be able to provide an alternative perspective for folks out there that maybe have read a book on or listened to one on Audible and it hasn't vibed like with them.
mm.
That's why, I let you know about all of the different unique things that take place prior to this, including making a decision to listen when you get up in the morning.
Yes.
Maybe hold off on that cup of coffee for half an hour,
Right, right. Let that
right?
cortisol build up naturally.
Yeah. And I still go for my cup of coffee. Don't get me wrong. I got one right here. but,
Cheers.
but, and that's the thing, that once you get comfortable, you know that this is going to occur. You've developed this within yourself. Then it seems it's okay if you want a cup of coffee. You're not severing that connection. It's okay
Yeah.
if you want to eat a burger and fries. You're not going to sever that connection. Once you have built it and put the discipline and the intention in, you become resilient to many of the
Yes.
things that the world throws at you. You learn to, well, I really don't want to fall victim to all of the Wi-Fi going on in X, Y, or
Mm,
Z location. So guess what? I'm going to intuit and infer to myself that it doesn't affect me.
yes. You almost have to
And
give it permission to affect you if it's going to affect you. And someone I really
right,
look up to Gabriel
once
Slick Dissident. Shout out to him. He's almost like he's reminding me in many ways that anything that harms us must have our consent.
Mhm.
In a spiritual sense, like obviously, if there's like a saber-tooth tiger that's gonna eat me, I don't need to give it my permission. But like things like like if
Right,
you're
right, but
gonna,
deeply
yeah,
emotional,
yeah,
all of that within you, and it's so wild. And like through some of these experiences, you realize that everything outside of you, the way you perceive it, is a reflection of what you are inside.
for sure,
So you can actually, you do have freedom of choice.
yeah,
You do have a freedom of understanding, of choosing, of even sort of, I don't want to say dictating, that's the wrong word, influencing your own outcomes,
Mhm.
you know, and
That goes back to what
to
you were saying earlier, because if you want to reach like a quote unquote psychedelic state, you could sit and breathe and focus, and you'll bring your brain waves down from that alpha beta state
Mhm.
into like those delta theta waves. And you can
Yeah,
do this using will. And imagine doing the same thing in the morning, or any part of your day to day routine. Even if you do consume some McDonald's, you can still regulate your nervous system, which I feel like for me personally, when I think about spirituality and like spiritual health, I think about my nervous system and like how is this electrical battery within inside of me functioning, and because that will
correct, correct.
spread out through every limb of my
Every aspect of your
every
being,
aspect.
yes,
Yes.
it starts in your core,
Mhm.
within that core, there's the physical core and there's the spiritual core, and the product of the physical and the spiritual meeting is the mental core.
Right
Right,
on,
it's
right
the
on, man.
operating system.
Yeah.
It's your instrument,
It's your
right? And
instrument. Yeah,
it's,
you got to
you
tune
have
it.
to learn
Yeah.
to play it, you have
Yeah.
to tune it, you have
Yeah.
to learn all of that, and then I find it that when I don't have to reach for the information, and that's the
Mm,
beauty of this thing, this akashic, this grand hall of information, is it's there when you're ready for it, only when you're
yes.
ready for it. It's
Mhm.
there when you have taken the right steps in order to be in its presence. So therefore, we are indeed being initiated. Those of us that decide to take the initiation seriously inevitably find ourselves face to face with this product of spirituality that is the Akashic record, this product of connection, this product of communication, right? Because when you're communicating on all cylinders, on all lines within yourself, you begin to learn to communicate with the world around you. You
Definitely.
start seeing synchronicities, you start having things line up, you have beautiful experiences. This self perpetuates the next flood of inference and intuition,
Mm.
which therefore influences your external, and that keeps coming back around,
I
and
like
you
to
can
call that
ride
the
that.
upward spiral.
Yes, you can ride
Yes.
that.
Yes.
You don't have to paddle out every time, dude. You
Yeah.
can ride that. And once you learn to ride that, listen, dude, like Mother Akasha, or the infinite all, she loves she loves to be ridden. Okay, like
Yeah, yeah. She
I'm
really
just putting it out there.
does. She
She loves
really
to be,
does.
she wants
Yeah.
you to ride her, dude, and that's part
My
of the
fucking
reason
cat just
why.
started scratching me as soon as you said that. She's like, pay attention to me.
Yeah, dude, she wants
Yeah.
you to ride, bro. That's what she's about. She's about
Yeah.
taking you for that ride down that road on that journey. And but you have to take precautions. What do you do when you want
Yes.
to go drive somewhere? You got to fill up with gas. You got to
Mm.
get your oil changed. You have all these outward expressions of exactly what we need to do within, and we just don't see it,
Right.
until we're
Right.
ready to do that work, that great work, that hermetic principle,
This is our
you
magnum
know?
opus, my friend. And
Dude, incredible.
unfortunately, I am running low on time, but I do want to ask you as a closing question, because what you've put forth is a really cool, it's very hermetic to me, because I feel like we're touching on this vibratory power that's within us. And
Yeah.
at the same time, I think about it paradoxically. And as a closing question, I want to ask you this, I want to continue researching and improving my logical flow and learning more, but I know I can tap into this akashic sanctuary, I'm going to start calling it, whenever I
Right.
want, as long as I
Right.
can focus and maintain like a centeredness. So in a very chaotic world where people feel like maybe they're being pushed off of their center, off of their
Mhm.
homeostatic flow state, what is the best way for you if you feel like the anxiety is bubbling up, or you feel like you're sinking down into a depression, whatever direction your energy is flowing in?
Yeah,
What is your favorite way other than sitting and meditating? Like, let's say you're out in public and
definitely.
you're
Yeah,
feeling it. Like,
definitely.
what would you suggest to people?
Um, a mindful practice of some kind, and this can look like anything. This can look like going into the bathroom and splashing water in your face.
Mm,
This can look like many things, and that's how it starts for a lot of us. We have panic attacks, we have these things going on, so we go into a restroom, we splash water on us, and we inadvertently do a breathing exercise. Right, so that's your body shoving you in the right direction.
mm,
Okay, like pay attention to those moments, because when you get worked up and you start breathing heavier, you're breathing heavier because your brain is telling you it needs a release of a certain chemical.
yes.
By breathing, you are doing that. That's why the breath is the connection to the divine, right? Which is why I had to stop smoking before I had any of these experiences. These profound meditative experiences did not come until after I stopped smoking.
Mm,
And I mean smoking in general. Of course, if I feel compelled to use a hemp product, I might decide to eat a gummy, or maybe take a couple of lifts off of like a vape or something. But ultimately, you don't want to coat your insides with something when you need the oxygen to get into your blood, because it stimulates your neurochemicals. Like, oxidation is what processes our chemistry, and we have to have that and the water and the electrolytes and electricity. So there are these elements, and this comes from study and hermetic teaching. So it's all on the back of logic. So nothing I've said is completely woo woo or
mm.
or taboo. It's there for folks if they want to look up the information. Look anything Manly P. Hall, look at the Apocrypha, look at all of these things that maybe you never thought to look at because you thought, well, that's satanic or evil or something. Like, give things a chance before you label them, is all I'm saying. But if you're in the moment and like you feel compelled, like for me, I'll tell you, I'm kind of partial to grounding.
Mm,
And so I work in an environment where I'm in a cooler all the time. I have many layers on, so I'm building up a massive static charge all the time. That can be uncomfortable. Um, I have learned that grounding releases like almost all of my inflammation. I've learned that I can do this at work because there are metal poles that are anchored into the ground, and I take my rubber gloves off and I'll hold on to that post for a second. I'm over the fact of wondering whether people are going to think I'm weird, right? So you're going to have to listen, you're going to have to get
yeah.
over that thinking, caring about what other people think, because whatever you perceive they are thinking of you is what you're thinking of yourself.
You're gonna look cool if you just own it and be like, yeah, I'm connecting back
Dude, I
to
dance
source right
around.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I dance around. I like do rhythmic movements.
Mm,
If my energy, that's another thing, movement, right? If you're feeling stuck,
take a
one of the
walk.
fastest way to take a walk, listen, swing your arms around,
Mm,
freaking gyrate, do bust a move real quick. I mean, whatever it takes to break that pattern. And so grounding for me, I've got a grounding mat in my living room. I love it. It allows me, when I stand on it, not only am I physically connecting with the ground, but I'm able to mentally will my negative energies out through my feet.
mm.
And if you can't ground, then shake some of that stuff off. There's reasons for so many things, including the song Shake It Off, right? So,
Definitely.
so, pay attention to the little things,
Mm.
enjoy them, and shake it off. That's,
That's awesome
that's
advice,
it.
man. Yeah, yeah. Like energy's got to go somewhere. And you're bringing me back to this awesome quote. So I'm gonna send you this song. I'm drawing a quick blank. Let me quickly look it up. But this was when I was referring to that Wookie Foot song. It's got these wonderful lyrics. It's there's no way out, but there's a way in. And this is essentially, you know, oh, it's called You're It, like tag, You're It. You're It by Wookiefoot. It's
Awesome.
really cool that you've put forth esoteric information from your own experience, but you've also paired that in the end and throughout with really practical guidance. And I feel like for me personally, Randy, I'm thankful that you've listened to this guidance, because the story that you've told tonight, the many pieces of wisdom that you've offered to us tonight, I feel like I've I've noticed that this can only come out of you if you've accepted what's inside of you. And it's really cool. It's you kind of mentioned the Gospel of Thomas, I think, earlier, and I
Mhm.
probably said this like 7 times in the last month or so, but you've brought out what is within you and it saved you. And I thank you for that, my friend. And I'm really grateful we've had to have this discussion. You've made the Local Listens podcast a better place. And so
Epic.
one more time, let people know about the Red Thread podcast and anything else you want to leave people with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Bro.
So yeah, I've got the Red Thread podcast on vast majority of podcatchers. I also have the YouTube, which is the same handle as my Instagram. It's at random fracts. So if you think fractals, you'll be okay.
Mm,
Don't think factual or facts, but think fracts.
factual.
So yeah, you know what I mean? Because we live in a very, divided and fractured world. So anyway, and we all seem a little bit random. So that all ties in. But the Red Thread podcast, wherever you want to catch your podcasts at. The YouTube channel has a little bit more of like the hidden history stuff, the stolen history, kind of just wing on some of those threads on those blogs and things like that. And man, just whatever you're doing, just do it for you.
Mm.
That's the probably the last word I have. And you know, it's a beautiful thing. You'll get there. I got faith and love for everybody out there that's struggling or that is excelling. Much love to you. Bring somebody else along. You know what I mean? Like reach out, bring somebody else along. And I'm so stoked to have been able to provide some insight and of service to those out there. Thank you so much, Jake, for having me on, dude. It was absolutely amazing. I love your poster in the background, by the way.
Thanks,
And
man. Thank you.
I've had that appear to me in an
Yes.
experience exactly like that. And I don't think it's because I saw the painting before. I think that there was something
Mm,
profound to that particular rendering, let's say, of a
yes.
conscious being. So, yeah, much love, brother. Much love.
You are much appreciated, my friend. I'm happy that we were brought together through these algorithms, this fractalized world. And I
Yes,
want to wish you the absolute best. And Randy, I'm looking forward to chatting with you again very soon.
for sure, man. For sure. Keep that string out, man, and I'll give her a tug. Well, talk
Right
to you.
on, brother. Take care.
All right, dude. Later.